All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Isabel Krome. I'm the Associate Director here at the Temple Small Business Development Center, and welcome. In honor of today's being National AI Day, we decided to offer a session on strategy first, how you should be using AI if you're a small business owner. So before I get into this, let me start with a couple of housekeeping notes. You'll notice you've been joined today in listen-only mode. That's because we are anticipating a fair number of attendees. We wanted to just keep things in terms of background noise and disruptions to a minimum. That's not because we don't want your participation. We're eager for your feedback, your questions. I should say I, not we. I'm the only one here today presenting. I look forward to any feedback or questions or notes that you might have. I encourage you to share those in the chat. And you can also utilize the Q&A function. We will be sharing slides with attendees, and I also have an extra goodie to share that I'll talk about as we move through the program today. As you've noticed, the chat is active. If you are somebody who has a B2B focus in your business and you want to introduce yourself and your business to the attendees, you're very welcome to do so. Drop a link to your website, tell us what you do. And if you have a question you want to make sure I see, in case the chat gets very active, feel free to use the question and answer function, and you'll see me catch those as we go along. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started today. A little bit about the Small Business Development Center Network. We are proud to have served the Southeast Pennsylvania community for 43 years. We opened in 1983. And our mission is to help small businesses start, grow, and prosper. We're proud to be part of a statewide network of small business development centers and a nationally accredited network of small business development centers that provide no-cost consulting services and business education to entrepreneurs in all stages of development in every zip code in the United States. And here there's a map of the Pennsylvania network. If you are not local to us here in Philadelphia, you can find your local SBDC on this map or by going to pasbdc.org. A little bit about me, if you're curious, who's been talking at you for a few minutes here. I'm our Associate Director. I've been with the SBDC since 2021. I also, before that, ran a women's business center. I've been an entrepreneur myself, and I love working with small businesses, specifically around strategy and AI implementation. So our SBDC, like I said, has been working in this area since 1983. We're proud to be hosted by Temple University's Fox School of Business and to be part of such an effective national network of providers. Our work is funded in part by the Small Business Administration, Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, of course, Temple University, and we're pleased that we're an accredited member of America's SBDC. Our mission is to support small businesses. We accomplish in two main ways, and that is small business consulting, no-cost small business consulting. If you're curious about how to connect with one of our consultants and you haven't already done so, that QR code will take you to a request for counseling form. You can also reach out to us at sbdc@temple.edu after the program today and ask for more information about how to connect with a consultant. Here's a few examples of things we can help you with. And as we go through, we'll talk about opportunities to work with a consultant on some of these issues that we're going to discuss today. They also provide a variety of training programs, educational programs throughout the year. Since you found this webinar, you probably know where to find more, but in case you don't, you can use that QR code to find our SBDC program calendar. And like I said, check out the Temple SBDC YouTube channel for lots of good info and recordings from previous sessions. Okay, so let's get into today's topic. Today's topic is strategy first, how you should be using AI. And I have some strong opinions about this, as you might imagine. But I want to also be clear about what my objectives for today's session are, because they might be a little different from AI programming that you've been to in the past. My goal for today, I want to say at the top, is not to discuss or recommend specific AI tools or platforms. It's not really what we're doing. Here's what we're going to do instead. As you review the learning objectives on the screen, and I'll just leave you to read them, I'm going to run a couple of polls to give me a sense of who is in the room. That's going to really help me as we go through. So I'm going to start with a poll on how familiar are you with AI? So you'll see on your screen a poll that's jumped up. I'm curious what your current level of familiarity is with artificial intelligence, generative AI. No wrong answers here. Just curious where we all are. And as you answer that, I'll review a couple of those learning objectives. I'm first interested in making sure that everyone in the room understands the difference between a strategy first and a technology first approach to implementing AI. We're going to work to evaluate your business's strategic goals and your operations, and hopefully that will help you identify the best and most sustainable path to AI implementation for your business. And at the end, we're going to go through a very specific action plan so that you can leave with a concrete plan for how to implement all the topics we're going to discuss in your business. So thank you all for completing that poll. Most of you have done so. I'm going to leave it up for about 10 more seconds. Gone. Just to move quickly through the content. So I'll go ahead and end this poll. And we have a nice mix of people in the room today. If you're curious and you want to see who else is here, it's a nice mix. We've got a couple of power users. I always love that. And a couple of folks who are new to the topic, especially fond of those. So thank you all for letting me know who's here. If you are a power user and you have thoughts you'd like to share, I welcome that. You're very welcome to share your expertise in the chat as we go along. Also curious just to know who we have in the room in terms of business status. So if you wouldn't mind, tell me about the stage of business you're in. Again, no wrong answers here. Are you in an established business that you own or that you manage? Maybe all the way down to, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I think this is a cool topic. Again, no wrong answers, just curious who we've got in the room. And then we'll get right into the topic of the day, which is strategy and AI. All right, I'm going to leave this up for another couple of seconds while I just take another slurp of my coffee. And beautiful. Okay, again, a really nice mix. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap the poll up. Thank you for that. This is really helpful to understand. We do have a few established entrepreneurs. Oh, I love that somebody is sharing, is introducing themselves in the chat. Thank you, Sylvia. Please, everybody, I encourage you, say hi in the chat. And if you're in business and you want to talk, if you're one of these, 14 business owners who are in the room today, please feel free to introduce yourself, introduce your business, drop a website. Happy to have you. All right, so we've got a wonderful mix of people in the room. Love it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the poll and move through the content. So I'm going to open with an anonymized story of an AI implementation in a small business that has gone a little awry. And this is pulled from LinkedIn. This is not one of my clients, but this is a real story. So this is Mike, and this is not a real picture of Mike. This is just a photo we found online. But Mike runs an e-commerce business focusing on selling running apparel and accessories, and he heard that AI could make his business more efficient and more profitable. And he saw it as a way to cut costs and improve customer service. So he spent 6 months and a lot of money on implementing an AI chatbot that was designed to handle customer inquiries in his business. So far, so good. What went wrong? So to start with, the project was led by Mike's marketing manager, who had only watched YouTube tutorials, had no formal AI training, and she chose the vendor based on, we're all getting more and more kind of cold emails selling us AI products, and she liked the flashy demo that she received from a vendor who reached out to her, and she chose the vendor based on that rather than choosing one who was based on industry suitability. And it was not a fit. The tool wasn't really built for e-commerce workflows. And so it gave wrong answers. It couldn't handle more complex customer issues. So that there was a vendor misfit. Another issue in this implementation was that there were hidden costs associated with the AI platform that they selected. The vendor's pricing model wasn't really clear. It seemed like it was going to be a $500 a month cost, which would have been a great trade-off if it was going to replace some of the customer support team that Mike employed. However, once they added in all the customizations and integrations that they needed to make the chatbot function, that cost ballooned and really significantly increased, plus upfront costs associated with those customizations. Next, the business did not test their customer service chatbot with actual customer data before they committed to it, so that they weren't really sure how it would actually perform in practice until it was live. Adding the chatbot to their existing systems required a lot of extra work, Zapier integrations, and consultant hours, all of which wasn't factored into their budget initially, contributing to those cost issues. So as a result, that chatbot really became a liability for Mike. support staff that, the humans he was still employing had to manually fix errors. The customer satisfaction rate decreased, and that initial investment was quickly compounded by wasted time, extra cost, and lost customer trust. So a couple of key lessons you can take away from this that we're going to talk more about, where it's important to match AI tools to your industry, to your workflows, rather than chasing, a fancy demo or a buzzy platform. Wherever possible, you want to test with real data before you commit, so you can avoid those unpleasant surprises, and factor in hidden costs as much as possible. Ask questions up front about customization, integration, and wherever you can, if you can afford to do so, bring in AI experts to support you as you implement these platforms, rather than overloading non-experts on your team with work outside of their expertise. And this story mirrors a lot of what we see with small businesses that aren't happy with how they've implemented AI. It's not necessarily the technology that is the problem. This vendor would have been a great fit for a different kind of business, but it's a lot of other issues surrounding this. And so I'm going to show you some statistics that we've found. AI adoption among small businesses is rising fast by a lot of measures, but the headline numbers, I think, deserve a little bit of a closer look. And as I'm saying this, I notice everybody's introducing themselves in the chat, which I love. Keep it up. That's great. If you do have questions, if I'm speaking too quickly, if there's a term I'm using that you're not familiar with, let me know in the chat, and I will modify my approach. But yes, AI adoption is rising fast, but the numbers tell a very different story depending on how you measure AI implementation. So the US Chamber of Commerce, this is that top line number, reports that 58% of small businesses said they used generative AI last year. And that's an increase up from 40% in 2024 and just 20% in 2023. So that's a striking curve. But this measure is pretty broad. Anybody who uses a chatbot or an image generator even once is in that number. If you dig down a little deeper, there's info on transaction data that JP Morgan Chase has gathered, and that's measuring how small businesses are actually spending money in this space. By December of 2025, only 17.7% of small businesses had actually adopted paid AI services, which is a nice reality check against that larger number. And if you look at employer firms versus non-employer firms, the difference is very striking. Employer firms were much higher at 26.1%. Non-employer businesses, 15.3% have paid for AI services. So a bit of a difference there between employer and non-employer firms. Actual spending data tends to be more conservative than that US Chamber of Commerce survey response, because it captures only tools that people are really paying for consistently and presumably therefore value and are using. When you look at harder measures, the picture becomes even more modest. So there's data from the U.S. Census Bureau Business Trends and Outlook survey that reports only 8.8% of small firms are using AI to produce goods or services, as opposed to using them in administrative capacities. And that's an increase from where it was 6 months earlier. These are numbers from 2025 at the end of the year versus at the beginning of the year. However, still a small share, right? 8.8%, not very much. And this is for very smallest businesses, for businesses that are under 5 employees, these micro enterprises. Under 20% reported using AI as of May of this year in that same survey. All right. There's another survey I want to just share from the National Federation of Independent Businesses that I think is really a useful measure here. 24% of small business owners reported currently using AI. So that's 76% who don't, and 75% of that number say that they have no plans to start in the next 12 months. So we have a large group that's experimenting, a smaller group that's actually integrating AI into how they work and paying for specific AI tools, and a majority that are watching from the sidelines. So the question I have is, of those who are trying, how many are seeing real results and real value, and what can we learn from them? So another couple of statistics before I get into this. If you could raise your hand for me, and I know those of you who haven't done that in a while, it's under reactions on your AI on your Zoom tools. How many of you have tried an AI tool in your business in the last year or so? Raise your hands for me. Beautiful. Okay. A nice percentage of you. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to use the clap reaction if it's stuck, if you're still using that tool. Okay, some of you are keeping your hands up. I'm gonna guess that that means that those are folks for whom are, so it's a smaller number, right? Smaller number of you are saying that it's stuck. Okay, so you've probably heard a lot of this info, and these figures on this slide are drawn from larger enterprises, not necessarily micro enterprises or small businesses, but if you're seeing, you've seen, I'm sure, this big number, 80% of AI projects fail. That came out in a RAND report earlier this year, got a lot of headlines. Getting into that a little bit deeper, of organizations that have implemented AI, only 26% of them have moved beyond proof of concept and generated tangible AI value. That's according to Boston Consulting Group research. And that number, the number of organizations that are abandoning AI initiatives rose this year from 17% to 42%. Nearly half of organizations reported that there is no enterprise objective where generative AI can produce a strong positive impact. So if well-resourced companies, large companies with dedicated IT teams are struggling to get AI projects across the finish line, that tells you a little bit about what is making this hard. And it's not necessarily the technology. I think it's, in my opinion, my working theory, based on working with small businesses on this work for a long time, is that it's deeper than the technology and also simpler in some ways. So why, in my experience, do these small business AI efforts fail? So I see a couple of patterns in the businesses that we work with here at the SBDC, and I spend a lot of time talking about this with SBDC consultants around the network as part of an AI working group. So I see three big patterns. The first is the shiny tool trap. This is the most common failure, I would say. So adopting AI, not because it solves a specific problem for your business, because it feels like the thing you're supposed to be doing, or there's a flashy tool that you want to adopt. And that's that technology first approach rather than a strategy first approach. And what makes this relevant for micro enterprises, the census data, as I said, shows that among small businesses with fewer than 5 employees who have made the choice not to use AI, the majority of them said that it wasn't applicable to their business. Not that it was too expensive or too complicated, they just couldn't see the use case. And I think that those are not the businesses that are in trouble. The businesses that said no thoughtfully aren't the ones in trouble. The ones who said yes reflexively are the ones who are facing issues. The second pattern that I want to point to is abandonment after proof of concept. And this shows up a little bit further down the road. And this is true with businesses of all sizes, as you saw on that slide, the slide before this. Businesses that pilot an AI tool, can't demonstrate clear value with it, and then quietly drop it. And that's the leading causes, as I've said, are about misunderstood business problems, that technology first approach, and I think also over ambitious problem selection, trying to use AI to fix things that it's not really set up well to fix. The last one is one that people don't talk about a lot, but I think is really happening a ton, and that is tool adoption without process change. So you're dropping an AI tool on top of an existing workflow and expecting transformation. AI is not going to redesign how you work. It executes within the process that you put it in. The productivity benefits are real. Among AI users, 30% report increased productivity, 23% report improved quality, but only 5% report that AI has led to meaningful revenue increases. So the productivity benefits are real, but they don't automatically translate to business outcomes. And in my opinion, that's because they're often not connected to a strategic goal. All right, I'll leave that there. So the question isn't what can AI do? It's what does my business need? The through line across all three of these patterns, the businesses that struggle on all sizes of the scale, from the Fortune 500s who are abandoning proof of concept to solo operators who stopped logging in after a few months. They started with a tool. They asked, what can AI do, rather than what does my business really need? The businesses that I work with that are seeing real and durable results, even the small ones, even solo operators, they tend to share one thing. They got specific about the problem first, and then they found their way to a tool that was best suited for that problem second. So that's the approach that I'm going to recommend to all of you today. Strategy first. So the answer is starting with your strategy. When I say start with your strategic goals, I want to acknowledge some things. I know I'm talking to a bunch of small business owners here. And that can sometimes feel like, taking the time out to work on strategic planning can feel like something that it doesn't really fit in the way that small businesses have to operate, right? You're doing a ton of things. You've got a lot on your plate being pulled in all kinds of directions. Time is often your most precious commodity. Taking time to do a strategic plan feels like something that like a large corporation might do. Finding time for that while you're working flat out can feel impossible. But what I want to make the case to you the case I want to make to you is strategy at its core is just about knowing where you're trying to go and making deliberate choices about how to get there. And that's it. You don't need, a multi-day strategic planning retreat. You don't need a fancy consultant. You just need to be you need to be able to answer two big questions. What does success look like for my business in the next, let's say 1 to 2 years? And what's standing between me and that success? The reason we start here before we ever talk about an AI tool is that a tool without a destination is just added overhead expense. Every dollar and every hour that you put into AI implementation, and I know these are precious resources for small businesses, we want it to be traceable back to a specific business outcome that you're trying to reach. And if it isn't, it's just adding to your overhead. It's adding to those monthly platform fees that you're paying without necessarily adding real value to your business. And I'm so aware of why this step gets skipped so often, especially for small businesses. It's not because you're careless, right? It's because when you are a 1, a 2, a 3, a 5 person operation, the urgent completely drowns out the important where it can. You're doing all the work. You're managing your clients, you're handling your admin, you're putting out fires, you're answering customer inquiries, all at the same time. And sitting down to think about where your business is going to go in 18 months can really feel like a luxury, but the cost of skipping it is real. Every business decision that you make, including AI, but not just limited to AI, every business decision that you make gets made reactively. You're adopting tools based on what's buzzing in your industry. You're reacting to things that are happening to your business, and you're not necessarily being proactive or being intentional, and nothing quite sticks, right? The good news is that clarity on strategic objectives doesn't require a multi-day strategic retreat. It can happen in an afternoon if you use the right tools. And I'm going to highlight a couple of strategic planning tools I think are very useful on small business scale. I also noticed that there are several strategic planning consultants and advisory services in the chat. I love you guys. Please keep talking about what you do. And if this is a service that you might need, consider looking around at some of the local vendors we have in the space. So don't use all of these, I just want to give you a couple of options to consider. I really love the SWOT approach. That's strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is if it's done well for a small business, can be a very powerful tool, but you do have to be really honest about your weaknesses and your threats. It's not always easy. If you add this additional question, what is one move that plays to my strengths while addressing my most important weakness or threat? That can be really clarifying in thinking about strategic objectives. I like a business model canvas as a starting point for a lot of strategic planning because it gives you a snapshot of where your business is. What you can do is make a BMC of what's going on in your business right now, and another one of what you want your business to be doing in that kind of end state 2 years out or so. That can also be clarifying and help you see what are the changes that we need to make between now and then. There's also a few different one-page strategic plans you can explore. Growth Wheel is a great strategic planning framework that a lot of our consultants use. There's lots of options out there. I'm not recommending one or the other. I also really like this. Growth Wheel is a strategic planning framework that starts with a 360 assessment. If you're interested, reach out to us. We have a couple of consultants who are trained in this framework who can help you. It's a great assessment and strategic planning tool. I recommend it. It is proprietary and trademarked, and you won't be able to access it without working with somebody who's a certified growth wheel coach. Happily, we have a few of them on our staff. BMC, I see in the question, BMC stands for Business Model Canvas, and it's that second planning tool that I mentioned. It's a great visual planning tool. It's kind of like a one-page miniature business plan. And if you like this, we use it in our first steps class, and there's also tons and tons and tons of videos on YouTube about how to use a business model canvas. And again, I'm not recommending that you use all of these, just if you're looking for a strategic planning tool, here's a couple that you can use. I also love this great little DIY set of questions. where are we that, if you ask these three basic questions, and if you are an employer, I encourage you to take this to your next staff meeting and try this with your team. Genuinely try to engage in the dialogue. You might be surprised by what you hear, but here are those three basic questions. Where are we now? And I want you to be pretty honest with yourself about what is going well, what is going badly. Look at revenue trends, the client mix that you have, what's working, what's not working. The second question, where do we want to be in 12 to 18 months? And I recommend that shorter time frame as opposed to like a 3-year or a 5-year strategic plan, because it's just a little easier to get real about that. And I want you to think about a specific outcome. That could be a revenue number you're looking for, a client count, a new line of business, whatever that might be. And what's the biggest thing standing in our way? Ask your team this. If you have one, they have thoughts, they have opinions, and those are well-informed opinions that you should consider. Okay, I was going to do a strategic planning exercise, but I'm a little behind time. So I'm going to move through this quickly. I'm just going to encourage you to use one of these frameworks to get some clarity on your goals. The strategic planning exercise I was going to do, which I don't really think we have a lot of time for, is called 3 Big Rocks. And maybe we'll do a miniature version of it. Okay, so I want you to find a piece of paper, open an email that you can an email window you can type into, whatever it is, but find a place to jot some notes down. And I want you to write down answers to this prompt. Picture yourself in a year, July 2027, looking back on the last 12 months, and you're happy about how that went for your business. What happened? What changed? Write down whatever comes up, whatever feels most relevant. I'm going to give you 90 seconds to do this. There's no wrong answer. As many answers as you can. Again, sheet of paper, email draft, whatever you've got, but write down some answers. What happened? If future you is looking back and you're pleased about how everything has gone, what are you pleased about? And I'm going to shut up for just a minute while you do this. Great content in the chat. I love it. All right. I'm going to bring us back. So I want you to look at everything you wrote down. I want you to circle the 2 or the 3 things that feel most important to you. Those are your big rocks. Everything else is just gravel. Those are the strategic objectives you're going to try to build towards. Those are the goals that we're going to be focusing on throughout the rest of the session. I want you to hold on to this question for the rest of the webinar. Of the things that you just wrote down in circle, those 3 big rocks, which of those outcomes that you're pleased with, that future you are so happy about, which objectives or outcomes are being slowed down or blocked by something operational in your business? That could be a task that takes too long, a process that's inconsistent, a function that you can't afford to hire for, because that's where we're going to go next. And the next thing I'm going to have you do is challenging without data. So we're gonna circle back. I'm going to encourage you to look at this, what I'm asking you to do next, and circle back to it as part of your action plan. I want you to translate your goals into problem statements. And I've got a few examples here. And again, this is hard to do without getting deep into your actual business operations and the metrics that you measure and all of your data. The strategic goals, the things you just wrote down, they tend to be stated as outcomes. I want to grow revenue. I want to get more clients. I want to spend less time on admin. And those are great destinations, but they don't necessarily tell you how to get there. To make a good decision about AI implementation or about any other kind of operational question, you got to go one level deeper and turn that outcome into a problem statement. A problem statement names the specific operational friction that is preventing the outcome that you want. So here's a few examples on the screen. I hate when a slide has a lot of text on it, but I couldn't avoid it in this case. So, a couple of translations, I lose a bunch of my inbound leads because I can't respond within that first hour. If I could wave a magic wand and do one thing for the clients I work with, that quick response time would be it. Fixes a lot of business development challenges. Maybe your goal is to improve client retention, and what you find out when you talk to your clients is that they feel out of the loop between project milestones. You're lacking a systematic check-in process. That's a well-defined problem statement. Maybe you want to increase your average project value, and when you dig a little bit into how you quote, how you estimate, you realize that you're always estimating from memory and from gut rather than tracking actual time and costs associated with projects, which means that you don't have a clear picture of which kinds of work are most profitable for your business. And that's such an important piece of information to know about your business. There's a great comment from a consultant in the chat. I encourage you to take a look at. Again, maybe this is another one that I think a lot of people might have as an outcome, or if you think about it, stop being the bottleneck in my own business, right? I talk a lot with my established businesses about owner dependency. If you are somebody in your business for where every client decision, question, or deliverable has to go through you because you've never documented how you do anything, you don't have a lot of process documentation, you can't delegate, that's a challenge for your business. That's a real problem that you should look at solving because it's going to limit the ultimate value that your business can build. If you're thinking about selling that business down the road and transitioning out of it, it's going to be a barrier for you when it comes to that sale point. Owner dependency is a red flag. It's an issue when it comes time to think about succession planning and valuation. So this is a great strategic goal if you're looking for one. But again, all of this is designed to surface the strategic goal or goals that are most important to your business. This are just some examples. Now, again, this isn't necessarily easy to do. In the next section, we're going to talk about auditing your operations, and that's going to give you a structured way to find exactly where these friction points are. So revisit this after you've gone through this next part of the exercise. And that is auditing your operations before you automate. There's a saying in operations, never automate a process you haven't understood. And I would go one step further, never automate a process that you haven't evaluated. Not every bottleneck, and I know this is going to be controversial. I see some consultants in my chat who might have some feelings about this. Not every bottleneck in your business deserves to be solved. Not every time-consuming task is actually a constraint on your growth. What we're doing in this section is building the bridge between those strategic goals that you defined just, with that big rocks exercise, or that you're going to define as part of your action plan, and the specific place where a tool, whether an AI tool or some other piece of technology, could actually move the needle. And that bridge is an operations audit. Now, for a large enterprise, for a corporation, that's a big undertaking. It can be expensive. It can have a major cost. It doesn't have to be anything quite so formal for a small business. Small businesses have two big strengths. One is we're great at collaboration and partnership, and the other is that we're nimble, we're adaptable and maneuverable. You probably, looking through these questions, have some answers that you're coming up just sitting here. But I encourage you to take the time to actually make a list of your workflows and work through the decision framework I'm going to show you, so you know you're being thorough. But as we're looking at our operations and we're going to talk about the workflows in your business, here are the three things you're looking for. Friction, where work gets delayed, dropped, or done inconsistently. Drain, which are tasks that take up time or energy that is disproportionate to the value they create. Or dependency, what only happens because you personally are doing it, or maybe that doesn't need to be true or shouldn't be true. Next up, here's how you're going to map a workflow. The first step in the audit is to map out your key workflows. A workflow is just any repeating sequence of tasks that produces an outcome that your business depends on. That could be anything. It could be getting a new client, delivering that core service you provide, sending an invoice, responding to an inquiry. Those are all workflows. For most micro enterprises, there are maybe 4 to 6 workflows that matter most. And I'm not even asking you to map all of them, just the workflows that are most directly connected to the strategic goal or goals you identified in the last section. And here's a quick and dirty way to map a workflow at a useful level of detail. We're not going to go too granular, and we're not going to stay too high level. So step 1, name the workflow. Call it what it is. It doesn't have to be snappy or fancy. Just give it a plain language title like new client onboarding, weekly content production, monthly invoicing, whatever that workflow actually produces. List the steps in order, what actually happens from trigger to completion, and not what you should be doing, but what you actually do in your business to get that work done. And then note at each step who is responsible. In a micro enterprise, that might just be you, but maybe, note where there's a contractor, a virtual assistant, or some vendor, some tool that's involved in that process. Step 4, note the time that each step takes. Rough is fine. I'm not asking you to sit there with a stopwatch and time yourself, but just roughly. That'll help you look for those disproportionate time sinks. You don't need to be super precise to find those. And then where are the friction points? Where does this workflow stall, often require rework, or depend on your personal intervention in a way that creates a bottleneck? So it doesn't need to be beautiful. This can be done on a legal pad. You can do this on a whiteboard. The point is just to make the invisible visible, because so often small business owners carry your workflows entirely in your heads, which means that those inefficiencies are just as invisible as the workflows themselves. So a quick example, let's say you're going to map out responding to a new inquiry. And the trigger is a new email or message arrives in your inbox. The steps include reading it. Maybe that takes 1 to 2 minutes. Assessing fit. Maybe that takes 30 seconds, just a quick yes or no. Is this a good client for me? And then drafting a response. Maybe that takes you 4 to 5 minutes. Maybe you're a quick email writer and it takes less time. And then you follow up if there's no reply. And for a lot of us, that last piece is where it's pretty variable, maybe inconsistent. All right, so that's a quick workflow map. And do this for the workflows that are most related to that strategic goal of yours. If it's client retention, if it's increasing revenue, whatever that is in your business. And if you're not sure what those workflows are, make an appointment with your friendly SBDC consultant and we'll help you think through it. So again, you've got that workflow mapped and you're going to come back and you're going to run through these 3 decisions. This is the decision filter. Is the task repetitive and rule-based? AI is, and this is going to help you identify whether this is a task that is a good candidate for automating or improving with AI. So question 1, is this task repetitive and rule-based? AI is very good at tasks that follow a specific pattern where the inputs might vary, but the process for handling them is basically the same every time. So drafting a response to a common customer question, formatting a report, categorizing expenses, scheduling a follow-up. AI is much less useful and could even be risky when the task requires judgment, deep, relational nuance, deep contextual knowledge that might live inside the head of a person like you or a key employee. So that, a proposal for a long-standing client with particular sensitivities, not a great candidate for AI automation. A difficult conversation about scope creep, definitely don't want to let a robot handle that. A creative direction that reflects your brand's distinctive voice, it can be risky to use AI for that because you might lose that authenticity behind your distinctive brand. Question here, rule-based, meaning that there is, you can define kind of the rules that this task should follow. So the first screen is, does this task follow a repeatable logic? And again, some great folks in the chat talking about how their work can help you as a small business owner accomplish some of these tasks. Question 2, does this task consume time that is disproportionate to the value it produces? So this is the drain test, right? Some tasks take a long time and they're genuinely high value and the time is part of it. That's deep client work, relationship building. Strategic thinking can take some time, but it's worth it. The time is part of it. Those aren't good candidates for automation, even if they're time consuming, because that time is part of the value. What you're looking for are tasks that take significant time, but whose value isn't in whose value isn't in their execution, but in their completion. They just need to be done. So invoicing, right? Data entry, social media scheduling, initial inquiry responses, right? Weekly reporting. These tasks need to get done, but whether they get done by you at 10 p.m. on a weeknight or by an AI agent at 2 a.m. doesn't really affect the quality of the outcome. A useful gut check question, if the task was completed well, but you didn't do it yourself, would the outcome be any different? If the answer is no, that might be a strong candidate for automation. You can't hear me. Okay, I'm going to talk a little louder. Am I hard to hear? I'll try to speak up. Thank you for that note. Question 3. Okay, good. People can hear me. Okay, great. All right. The last question, would faster or better execution of this task move the needle on a strategic goal? This is the most important question, and it's the one, as I've said, that people tend to skip. And you can't answer this question if you haven't defined your strategic goals. So you're going to go back to those strategic goals. And like I said, not every bottleneck is a strategic bottleneck. You might have a workflow that's slow and annoying, but even if you fixed it, it wouldn't move you meaningfully towards that 12-month goal. Fixing that is a quality of life improvement, worth doing, but maybe not the first thing you should tackle when you're thinking about AI implementation and where you spend your first AI dollar. What you're looking for is a friction point in a workflow that sits on a critical path to a goal that really matters to your business. And if your goal is to increase revenue and your workflow audit reveals that you're losing a third of your inbound leads because your follow-up is slow and maybe inconsistent, fixing that is a strategic priority, right? It matters. If your goal is the same, but the audit reveals that you spend 2 hours a week formatting invoices, not saying that's not a drain worth addressing, it certainly is, but it might not be your first move because it's not going to get you closer to that strategic goal of increasing revenue. All right. So run every friction point you identified through these 3 questions. The ones that pass all 3, those are your highest priority candidates for AI assistant improvement. And there's, again, really great conversations in the chat right now. I encourage you to take a look at that. Fantastic stuff. Thank you all for your contributions. So just to run you through a couple of examples of where thoughtfully implemented AI can add value, can tend to add value. So one is customer and client communication. So again, drafting responses to common inquiries, following up on outstanding items or prompting you to follow up on outstanding items, writing routine update messages. The data from NFIB shows that communications are one of the top reported use cases for small businesses. And they really, I think it's that is for a reason. The task is repetitive, the quality bar is, pretty well defined, and the time savings quick. Another one, content and marketing production. So this is first drafts of things like blog posts, social captions, email newsletters, service descriptions, and my keyword here is first drafts. AI should be used here to accelerate your production, not to replace your voice or your judgment. It removes that kind of blank page problem, but it's still on you to do the editing, to make sure that what you're putting out there positions your brand the way you want to position it, all that good stuff. You got to still be involved. Administrative processing is another one. So this is stuff like your scheduling, expense categorization, data entry, formatting reports. These are high drain. There's not a lot of judgment required. Strong automation candidates by the criteria that we just discussed. Research and summarization. If you came to any of my AI programs, maybe 2 years ago, I was a holdout on using AI for research, and I'm still skeptical. But doing a quick landscape scan, summarizing long documents or meeting notes, pulling key information from really dense sources, like here's a 60-page RFP, here's my capability statement, help me evaluate whether I should dig deeper into this opportunity, yes or no. AI handles information volume really well. It might not get nuance, but handling a volume of information, it's pretty good at that. So summarization is a strong one. Initial research, great ways to use AI, especially those AI platforms that can cite their sources. And then knowledge base and documentation. So turning some of that knowledge that lives only in your head into written standard operating procedures, SOPs, FAQ documents, client-facing guides can be really, really helpful. If you're one of those people who really responded to that I'm the bottleneck because nothing is documented problem statement a couple of slides back, using AI to create some SOPs can be really, really game-changing for a small business. And if you're thinking about hiring your first employee and you want some help with that, oh my goodness, it's so much better to have an onboarding plan and some SOPs, even if they're AI generated and maybe a little bit imperfect. That first employee can help you update those as you onboard them and can help identify gaps between the written SOP and the reality. But getting them on paper, getting a first draft, AI is great at doing that. And there are some really great tools that are designed to do this. Where AI tends to disappoint, again, in my opinion and in my experience, is in things like this: relationship dependent communication, messages where there is relational context, history with a client, where the tone really matters. AI can draft, but it cannot replicate the judgment of the person who knows that relationship, the client sensitivities, the subtext of the problem, all that good stuff. You don't want to use an AI for this, right? Absolutely, AI is good for that first draft, but it's got to be a living document that you evolve. Absolutely, thank you for that call, Paul. Original strategic thinking. AI is not going to replace the strategic thinking. You as the executive in your business, the owner in your business, you've got to be the one to originate the insight that there's a specific strategic move that your business needs to make. AI can be a thinking partner, but it is not a strategist. It's got to be you, right? Any judgment or knowledge that is highly specialized. So legal stuff, financial, compliance decisions that are in your specific industry, AI can produce really plausible sounding output in these areas, but plausible sounding and accurate are not the same thing. So I never recommend using an AI to produce highly specialized or regulated work products like, you wouldn't let an AI do, architectural drawings, right? But we're letting AI do legal documents all the time. Should we? Brand defining creative work is this last one, work that makes you recognizably you. The more that your competitive advantage as a business lives in your distinctive voice, your aesthetic, and your approach, the more carefully you need to make sure that that AI is not taking some of that authenticity and that voice out of your client-facing work. Okay, so decision filter, here are some questions that you should be able to answer before you implement a specific AI tool. What problem does this solve? How do I know if it's working? What am I going to measure to know if it's working, right? Not just, I think it's going to be great, I think it's working really well, but what are the metrics that in your business that are measurable that you can look to know if you're getting the outcomes you need to get out of a specific AI implementation? What changes in my business, in my operations to make this workflow stick? And if it doesn't work out, what's my exit plan? If you have answers to all 4 of these questions, good to move ahead. We're going to close with a 30-day action plan, and I think it's going to be helpful for you. But before we get into this, I do want to spend just a minute talking about something that I think doesn't get enough airtime in AI conversations, and I talked about it a fair amount, and that's risk. Not to scare you off, but the businesses that I think get the best results from AI are those that go in with clear eyes. So I'm going to move through a couple of these quickly and practically. And again, you're going to get the slides, you're going to get the deck. So over-reliance on AI is a real risk, and it's a little subtler than it might sound. It's not that you trust an AI output blindly on day one. It's just that over time, as its outputs are pretty good, your review process gets a little bit less thorough. You start approving things faster. You stop checking the math and the financial projection, right? You don't read the whole draft before you send it. That's a real risk. For a micro enterprise, it matters, I think, even more than in a larger organization, because you're usually the only quality control layer. You're the only kind of process that is going to catch those errors. There's no one else catching them before they go to a client. And so the mitigation step is really simple here, but it does require discipline. Keep reviewing the AI generated outputs. Don't let it become a rubber stamp. Next one, hallucinations and inaccurate information. AI tools can produce information that sounds really authoritative, but is simply wrong. Not exaggerated, but just like plain wrong. A statistic that's fabricated, a quote that's misattributed, a market size figure that has no basis. This is called hallucination. It happens with all current AI tools to varying degrees. So that risk is real. The mitigation here, very similar to the first one. Anything consequential that an AI tells you, verify from a primary source before you act on it or share it with a client. Privacy and security is, I think, one that's pretty, well understood, but is still urgent. If you are putting information into a public AI tool that is proprietary or confidential or private, that you need to understand where that data goes. A lot of tools, especially free tiers of a lot of these generative AI models, use the conversation data to train their models, which means that sensitive information that you put in could surface in principle in someone else's output. So develop AI safety guidelines. Read the data handling terms of any tool that you use so that you understand where your inputs are going. And so anything like client data, financial records, anything covered by an NDA should be on that list of things that you do not put into a tool without having really enterprise-grade data privacy guarantees, and that usually comes with a fee. The last couple ones, loss of authenticity. Again, your voice is a competitive asset for most small businesses, and clients choose you, not a generic service provider or a massive enterprise. Heavy AI use, especially in client-facing contexts, your social media feeds, your email templates, can really sand down that distinctiveness that makes you worth hiring to your clients in the first place. So generic marketing content and an artificial brand voice are the examples I've got here on the slide. But I think the deeper risk is really that relational risk. Clients in high trust service relationships can sense when communication has become templated, and that's a risk. So the mitigation here isn't to avoid AI in content, it's to maintain that editorial ownership, that review process. I think I've said that about 15 times today, but it remains really important. That review step is not optional if authenticity is part of your value proposition, and I guarantee you, for most of you in this room, it is. Unrealistic expectation is a pretty fair risk. AI is not plug and play, does not produce immediate results. So AI implementation can take time to set up properly. and integrate in your workflows in a way that's going to produce consistent and valuable output. The payoff can be real, but we want to be realistic about what we're expecting to get out of these tools. And again, we're going to talk about the 30-day action plan we're about to cover. And that's going to, thoughtful implementation can really be more sustainable and can, I think, hopefully produce better results that you can actually measure. The last one is workflow bitterness, and that we touched on this a little bit, but when a core workflow becomes dependent on a specific AI platform, that platform becomes a vulnerability, right? Tools get updated in ways that can break your processes. Pricing can change. AI vendors can become acquired and maybe can discontinue certain tools you're using. Free tiers can get paywalled. Mitigation here is an important one, and I recommend it to you highly. Anything that you're doing as part of your research and your process thinking before you implement an AI tool, keep it. You map out a workflow, keep that somewhere. You documented your decision logic around a specific friction point, keep that, keep it on file. That way, if that AI platform that you choose gets, for some reason you lose access to it, you're not starting from ground zero. Right? That work that you're doing is in itself a form of building resilience. Don't let it disappear. Okay, none of these risks are reasons to avoid AI. Instead, I want you to think of them as reasons to implement it thoughtfully, which is exactly what we're hopefully encouraging all of you to do in this deck today. Okay, one more quick. I'm going to skip this last case study, although I really like it. Okay, I'm not going to skip it. I'm going to talk quickly. 3-person consulting firm that wanted to, the strategic goal they identified was grow revenue by bringing on 2 new clients the next 6 months, but they didn't want to add headcount. Now, they did the whole audit process and they thought going in, the problem is probably lead generation. We want more clients, we need more leads, right? There's the thing. So they assumed the AI help would come in marketing, more content, more visibility. But when they actually mapped their workflows, what they discovered was the problem was conversion. They were losing prospective clients, not at the top of the funnel, but at the proposal stage, because the proposals were taking 3 to 4 hours to write and they were going out late. The quality is inconsistent. And it was, depending on how busy that founder was that week. So they ran that through the 3 questions. Is it repetitive and rule-based? Honestly, mostly yes, right? The structure of the boilerplate, the methodology sections, mostly the same. It consumes disproportionate time, but you see all that. So they implemented an AI-assisted proposal workflow that wasn't fully automated, but that was a structured drafting process where AI produces a first draft from a brief that whoever was the business development lead for that relationship filled out, and then the founder then refined and personalized. Again, that human review was very involved, so the proposal time dropped from 4 hours to under 90 minutes. Still effortful, still meaningful, but a lot faster. And with that change, they closed both their target clients within 4 months instead of 6. So what worked here, they didn't start with a tool. They didn't assume they knew what the problem was. They actually took the time to dig into their operations, found the friction point that was actually on the critical path, and the AI decision, what tool they implemented and how they used it, was the last decision, not the first. So that's what I am encouraging all of you to do. Start today. Now, I know I've talked really fast. We've covered a lot of ground. And if you're anything like most of the clients I work with, you might be happy with what we've talked about today. You might think I should really do this, but then life is going to get in the way. You're going to get busy and nothing's going to change. So I want to close with a very specific action plan that's going to take 4 to 7 hours over the course of the next month. I guarantee you have that time. And that's all you need. The goal of the next 30 days is narrow and achievable. Get from, I like what Isabel's saying, this makes sense, to I have one AI tool working on one specific problem and I know how to measure whether it's helping. That's it. That's all we're trying to do. And here's how you're going to do it. This is an overview. I'm going to talk through each of the 4 weeks, and then I'm going to close up with a survey. All right. Okay, so clarify. So week 1, clarify your strategic priorities. Block this in your calendar now. Set aside an hour to 90 minutes. Pick a preferred planning, strategic planning tool, whatever that preferred tool is for you, and look for your top 2 to 3 business priorities within the next 12 months. Stated as outcomes, not activities, not work on marketing. It's sign X number of clients by Y date, not get more organized, but reduce the time I spend on administrative tasks by half so I can take Fridays off by September, right? SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Specificity is what makes the rest of this whole thing work. Vague priorities produce vague outcomes. Get specific. That's week 1. Week 2, map those most consequential workflows related to those strategic priorities. take 1.5 to 2 hours. Again, you're not mapping everything, just the, let's say, 3 to 5 workflows that are most closely related to the outcomes that you care about. Use those 5-step mapping process. Do this on paper, in a document, in a whiteboard, whatever you're doing. But as you go through, you're looking for tasks that maybe only you can do, but probably shouldn't require you. Steps where work consistently stalls or requires reworks. Those are your signals, right? Don't insist on perfection. A rough, honest map is worth more than a polished, perfect one that took you 3 weeks. Just get it out on paper in a rough way. Week 3, identify your single highest priority friction point. And that's using those three questions. That's the decision filter we talked about. Is it repetitive and rule-based? Does it consume time disproportionate to the value it produces? And does it relate to the strategic priority I've identified? Take the time to pick just one friction point. And if you find 2 or 3 that are equally compelling, resist the temptation to split your attention. Pick one. You can address the others later, but we're going to try to get just one because we're trying to do this in a way that actually fits into how your life as a business owner. Last week, this is where you're actually going to look at specific AI tools. You're ready to look at tools. When you've got a problem statement in hand, you're going to research a handful of tools that are designed to address the specific friction point you identified in a business like yours. Not the most popular AI tool in general, but ones that fit your specific platform, your specific industry. And here are those 4 questions. What specific problem does this solve? How will I measure if it's working? What changes in my business to make sure that it sticks? And what's my exit plan? If you can't answer question 2, how you'll measure success, don't adopt the tool yet. Define the metric first. And if you need help with that, again, talk to your SBDC consultant. And then pilot it. Maybe you do a free trial, but give it a few weeks of genuine use and keep track of what's working and what's not. At the end of, let's say, three or 4 weeks of using that tool, you should be able to answer, is this moving me towards my stated outcome or not? And that answer is valuable. All right. So again, here's your 30-day action plan. I'll leave this up on the screen for a minute. If you're an overachiever, which I love my overachievers, so many entrepreneurs are, go ahead and block off the time in your calendar now. You know that time's going to get filled up if you don't block it off. I'll leave this up on the screen so you can take a minute and block off an hour and a half week 1, an hour and a half week 2, half an hour to 45 minutes week 3, 2 to 3 hours in week 4. Go. All right. And again, you're going to get a copy of this slide deck. And I'm also going to give you a copy of an AI workbook that we've been working with some fabulous students here at Temple to develop based on the approach I've talked about today. And I'm going to make sure that all of you get that in the follow-up email from today's webinar, which will probably go out late this week or early next. But you will get recording the slide deck and that AI workbook. Here were our objectives. I know we didn't talk about AI tools and platforms. Again, that was sort of the point. I want you to find the right problem first. And there's so many ways that is helpful for your business, not just in AI implementation, but across so many business decisions that you're making every day. Take the time to consider your strategy. Okay. We have about 2 minutes left. I'll hang out a little bit after this, but I'm happy to take questions that, about AI tools or platforms, any other topic. I'm happy to take some questions and sit here for questions. I think we accomplished our learning objectives. I hope you agree. Let me know how we did. We've shared the survey link a few times. It's a handful of questions long. It's real short. I'm very interested in your feedback. If you have questions, I'm happy to take them. While you're thinking of questions, you can check out our other webinars here on our events calendar. You can find, there's the link to our website and a QR code that'll take you to our webinar calendar. And I encourage you to check out everything else we've got going on. We've got a great hiring webinar coming up this month if you're thinking about hiring, and there's lots of good stuff coming up. Okay, and questions. I'll take them if you've got them. Otherwise, thanks for joining me today. Hopefully we'll see you at another session. If you'd like to connect with your SBDC consultant and you're not sure how to do so, a great first step, reach out to us, sbdc@temple.edu. All right, that's it from me. Any questions from anybody? Okay, I'm seeing lots of thanks, which I love, and not very many questions. So I'm just going to say thanks, everybody. If you think of questions after you hang up, my contact info is on our website. Please don't hesitate to drop me a line if you want to have a deeper conversation about this. Or maybe schedule a strategic planning session to help you get to those objectives. That'll help you figure out where you're getting with AI. All right, have a great rest of your week, everybody. Stay cool. Yes, thank you. privacy and cost benefits around AI. That's a great suggestion, Vala. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, take that that survey that we shared the link to and put that in the survey, because we do look at those when we're thinking about future programming ideas, and we'll take that feedback to heart for sure. There's the link again, in case you didn't see it. I'm going to plaster it all over. I'd love to know what you thought about today's webinar. And if you liked it, if you want more things like this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to working with at least some of you in the future. Love it. All right. Take care, everybody.